Hello and welcome to this presentation on VMware Workspace Portal 2.0, a best practices and technical overview of the product. The three main areas of this presentation will be focusing on the key themes of Workspace Portal, the features that it comes with and its best practices, and the enterprise features and the best practices that we have seen from customers implementing and from the previous versions that's been used in production for customers. First, a quick overview to look at some of the key themes, the prerequisites for successful implementation, and the overall architecture of how Workspace Portal is deployed. The key themes of Workspace Portal is that it's a comprehensive application, portal, and resource management asset. The version shipping now supports hosted applications from Horizon View 6.0, the RDSH posted or hosted applications. We also support XenApp integration, ThinApp packages, Office 365, SAML applications, or software as a service apps and web apps. And with that, on top of that, is the resource management, the categorization piece of this, so that you can fully manage and control access to all your different application types, and you can fully audit and access who can use which resources and which application types. Also, part of this release is a focus on the enterprise hardening. The identity and access method has been dramatically improved with the added benefit of access policies and a full auditing engine behind the scenes. This is a brief look at the architecture, the technical architecture as to how Workspace is deployed today. It contains, Workspace Portal 2.0 contains 4 virtual appliances. There's a gateway that sits in front of the other virtual appliances. The configurator is an admin tool where you configure the Workspace appliances. We have a connector which takes care of all the integration and the synchronization options between Horizon and all the other pieces that Workspace integrates with. That's the connector that takes care of that specifically. And then there's the service virtual appliance, and this is what's running the database, the Elasticsearch, the index engines, and all the web admin UI pieces that you see when you run Workspace Portal 2.0 is actually running off of the service virtual appliance. In its current release, all of these virtual appliances needs to be deployed on the same VLAN in the same broadcast domain. So that's definitely one of the best practices and the recommendations, that gateway, configurator, connector, and service are all deployed inside the same network range, basically. Some of the key prerequisites for deploying Horizon Workspace is listed here, the items and the description. I'll briefly detail the items here. DNS, both A and PDR records, the reverse records are really important, as we use those for validating the virtual appliances and also the resources that Workspace Portal integrates into. So it's important that both A and PDR records are available for your View connection servers or any other resource that Workspace Portal might actually integrate into. We also need a set IP pool for vCenter. SMTP services are used, and they're actually required up front when you do the initial deployment. So again, a recommendation as part of this is to have an SMTP service available when you start the initial deployment of Workspace. Firewall rules are well documented in the product documentation, but keep in mind that, again, all the external resources that Workspace integrates into, the firewall rules needs to be in place for the proper connectivity to work between, say, Workspace and your View connection servers or any other external access that you want to do. A fully qualified domain name is also an important part. So the URL that the users and the administrators are going to be accessing or using for accessing is a key thing as well that needs to be defined up front. Workspace Portal supports Active Directory as a user authentication backend. So we need Active Directory information. We need an account that has read and list access to the distinguished name values from where you want to sync your access. And it's important to keep in mind that a best practice is to use a read-only account. Workspace only reads information from Active Directory. It doesn't make any changes or anything. So best practice recommendations is to use read-only accounts. vCenter admin or vCenter access is a little bit different in that we need an admin account, at least during the initial deployment phase. So when the bootstrapping information happens and you're connecting connecting Workspace portal into your environment and you deploy it to vCenter, we need an admin account specifically for that. After the initial deployment, it's technically possible to lower the account privileges, so you don't need to run with the vCenter admin account after the initial deployment. And of course, a license key is required to do the full installation of Workspace. And also, we recommend that you use SSL certificates. It's an optional thing, but we do recommend that you change away from the self-signed certificates that the Workspace portal product ships with out of the box. Another key thing that we've seen some issues with, or configuration issues with, is the NTP services. All the VAs, as they ship today, gets the time from the ESXi host that they're running on. So it's a key thing to make sure that wherever the Workspace service or any other virtual appliance is running is actually getting its time synced from a proper NTP source. Otherwise, you will have time skew, and what's really important here is the SAML 2.0 that we use for authentication. It has a very low time span on the token, so if you have 10-15 seconds time skew between your integration options, view connection servers and Workspace, you can have potential issues with the authentication not fully working as expected. Next section is on hosted applications and some best practices and implementation guidance on how to set that up with Horizon View 6.0. The hosted applications architecture is very simple for connecting Workspace to the view. Basically, it's the same as it were before in the previous releases for desktops. Now we pick up on applications as well. So via the connection server from Workspace, we get resource entitlements. We go to the RDS farms, and then we deliver the applications directly to the endpoints using the Horizon client. So there is no added infrastructure components required here. It's simply the connector virtual appliance from Workspace reading information. It's a read-only thing, so there is no admin operations available. Goes to the connection server and then get resource entitlements and puts them in the Workspace catalog. So a very simple and a very proven architecture for getting the integration up and running. So any best practices and any recommendations we have follow what we had previously for the Workspace 1.8 release. Brief overview of what it actually does when users are launching in here. So all the apps the previous entitlement sets as part of this shows up in the Web UI launcher. So a user is able to access and launch any given resource type, and especially in this case, the hosted applications inside of Workspace. And what happens when a user clicks on a desktop or a hosted application, the view client launches and gives the user access to that resource. So a key requirement is having the view client installed on the endpoint that's actually launching the application specifically. And here we recommend the latest version that is supported with the Workspace Portal 2.0 release. Next is the Citrix XenApp integration. Again, this is very seamless for the user. The catalog items are simply being put into Workspace. So again, it's a read-only operation. We control, or we read information off of the Citrix XenApp farms, and then we put that into the catalog into into Workspace portal. So it shows up and it's seamless for the user. They can't see the difference between how the app is populated. They click the icon, and in this case, if it's a XenApp application, we require the Citrix receiver to be installed on the client or the endpoint. Just like for hosted applications for Horizon 6, we would require the Horizon client, but in this case, we need the Citrix receiver to successfully launch the XenApp applications. The first model that's shown here is what we show as the symbol deployment model. The architecture is a little bit more complex than it is with the Horizon hosted applications integration. In the fact is that we actually have a separate component that you need to install and maintain running on a Windows server, and that's called the integration broker. So the recommendation and the best practices for just setting this up for, say, a proof of concept or a small production environment would be the simple deployment model, having all the components running on a single integration broker. So you would have the single sign-on options, and you would have the resource and entitlement synchronization happening on the same integration broker for a small environment or for a proof of concept. Again, the app delivery happens very similar to the hosted applications pieces. We read entitlements from the existing Citrix XenApp farms. we deliver the app, and then we send out an ICA file to the clients, and the Citrix Retrieval launches that resource and gives the users access to it. The other model shown here is for large-scale or production environments where we have multiple integration brokers. Basically, we have an integration broker that is using the PowerShell SDK from Citrix to do the synchronization options, and we have multiple integration brokers running the single sign-on services. Now, the reason why we recommend this as a best practice option is to scale out the single sign-on components so users are not having any latency when they click an application. So by splitting the sync option and the SSO, you're allowed to more easily scale the single sign-on components without having to worry about having separate options for the sync agent. So keeping in mind that single sign-on is latency prone, you probably want to run that on a specific service and a specific integration broker. The next part is the ThinApp integration into Workspace and some recommendations and best practices on that specifically. In the latest release in Workspace Portal 2.0, we support delivering applications over ThinApp applications over HTTP. Actually, HTTPS is the protocol being used on 4.4.3. We're not streaming the applications. We are simply delivering the part of the package that's required for it to be launched. So even though you might have a ThinApp package that takes up 200 megabytes, if it only requires 50 megabytes to launch, we need to deliver those 50 megabytes over the HTTPS protocol, and then the users can successfully launch this. Now, this allows for a few different scenarios. First off, you don't have to domain join your computers anymore, and they don't have to have direct access to the shifts or DFS share where the package is actually stored. So we can allow anywhere access now and kind of bring your own device type solutions without that specific client or device having to be domain joined. In this release is also Windows DFS support for the app distribution. So now you can point it to a DFS share without and not having the requirement for pointing it to a specific shift share location. ThinApp 5.0 packages are also supported, 32-bit and 64-bit applications. There is a manual workaround for enabling the 64-bit applications, but it is fully supported, and this is documented in the product documentation pieces. Some of the Kerberos, the automatic logon mechanisms, single sign-on pieces has also been improved. So we try, the agent tries more efficiently to actually do the single sign-on and give user access to the client and to the packages without them having to manually log in and provide user credential information every time. A key new thing in the Workspace Portal release 2.0 is the access policies, which allows you to set per application policy settings. Some of the things that can be defined in an application access policy is authentication strength and time to live for SaaS applications specifically. In this release, we support SaaS applications only, so no ThinApps or other resource types as part of the catalog. It has to be a SaaS app. It doesn't have to be a SaaS app from the global catalog. It can be a corporately owned and controlled SaaS application, but it has to be a SaaS application implemented using SAML 2.0. It also allows us to define different authentication method based on where the users are coming from and what client types they're connecting with. So if the users are connecting externally, it's possible to allow or to require an RSA secure ID token instead of when users are internal, they will get user access to their applications using, say, single sign-on and Kerberos or username and password. Out of the box, we have a default policy applied that sets up automatically during installation, and this gives the users access to everything, the full portal and all the applications, so that out of the box you can get access to everything and we don't have any restrictions on who can do what based on their locations and so forth. There are two types of policies, even though they're not called out specifically by name. The first one, which is, as I mentioned before, ships with out of the box in the Workspace portal, is what is known as the portal policy. This shows up with the technical name of a default access policy set inside the admin UI. And this should, as shown here by the red box, it should be seen as, can the user get access or log into the portal, basically. So this is whatever changes are made to this portal policy specifically defines what the users can do and cannot do in regards to getting access to the portal. Now there's another concept marked here by the orange box, which is an application policy, and these are added manually. So say that you define your portal policy access to always require RSA secure ID no matter where the users are. Once they're logged in, you might have an application policy, in this example for WebEx, that gives users access to that application using Kerberos single sign-on. So again, this gives you an opportunity with the access policy to be more granular in your access control and time to live and authentication methods, depending on resource type, where the users are coming from, and so forth. Another new thing in this release of the Workspace portal is full multi-forest Active Directory support. The way multi-forest Active Directory support is integrated into Workspace is that it's being done and managed by domain joined connector virtual appliances. We don't require that there's a full trust or a one-way trust between the different forests. They can be separately dispersed forests, but we do require that at least one connector virtual appliance is joined to each of the forests. The concept of a user store is implemented inside a Workspace portal, and basically what a user store is that it groups and stores and synchronizes information from the different forests. So every time you have a connector domain joined or joined to a specific forest, you also have a user store. And as the screenshots call out here on the right hand side, is that once the user log in, they have to select the domain that they're a member of, and then there's an option from a client point of view to remember that setting going forward, so the users don't have to spell out specifically what domain type they have to log in with each and every time. And we support users and groups from multiple different AD forests. And again, this gives you, it's great for mergers and acquisitions, or if you're bringing in external companies and you don't have to do the full AD integration, you can actually give centralized access to some of these resources using Workspace portal. Some of the enterprise readiness features that's implemented in Workspace Portal 2.0 is the identity and access and some of the monitoring capabilities. From a monitoring point of view, some of the new features and some of the recommended best practices is enabling syslog and SNMP monitoring. In this release, syslogging can be enabled for all virtual appliances on the configurator via VA UI. So it's you can go into the web UI and the configurator, and you can define this for all the virtual appliances that takes part of the Workspace setting. You could also define this using CLI if you want more granular settings. So there are different levels of logging that can be defined as part of this. But the general recommendation here is at least to enable the syslogging on a virtual on a VApp basis for the whole Workspace setup, so you get centralized locking and you can see across all the different components as part of this. One thing to keep in mind here is that it's only Workspace specific locks that are being centralized using syslog, so we don't capture OS level messages or anything that's specific to say if the appliance is running on a disk space. For those specific operations, we recommend that you use something like vCenter operations that can do these guest specific metrics. SNMP 2 is also supported, and you can enable that using the CLI 2 only, and it exposes basically Horizon Workspace specific MIPS, and again, just like with syslogging, no OS specific information like disk and CPU utilization. Again, for that we recommend the vCenter operations tool to monitor and manage those aspects of the virtual appliances. Another thing that's been greatly enhanced in this release of Workspace Portal is the auditing and reporting capabilities. A detailed reports is added in the administration console of Workspace, and this gives you a full audit track of any audit and actions that has been carried out by any given user or any given object inside of Workspace. So who launched an application, at what time did they launch it, from what client specifically, or who altered security settings and entitlements and auditing on all of the different objects. And we provide statistics for this as well, so you can monitor and see how many users were logged in at any given point in time, as an example. This is powered by Elasticsearch specifically, and it's running on the service virtual appliances. And it's technically possible to go directly to the Elasticsearch engine to do deeper queries or to build your own UIs basically on top of the Elasticsearch pieces. Out of the box, it's not running, or you can't get access to it. You have to open up for the port specifically to Elasticsearch access, but it is fully supported if you want to run custom queries against the Elasticsearch engine. Some of the added reporting capabilities includes recent activity and overviews, which ships with reports out of the box basically. So we can see unique sessions and launched application lists, and you get the proper UI reporting capabilities directly out of the box with the Workspace portal.